This episode is presented by Recovery Centers of Montana.
If you or someone you know is struggling, getting help shouldn't feel out of reach.
Recovery Centers of Montana offers care across 6 locations, including inpatient facilities and outpatient clinics.
Step away from the noise and focus on getting your life back on track.
Learn more by calling 701-401-3000.
That's 701-401-3000.
Hi, I'm Megan Invick with Americans for Prosperity, North Dakota. One of the cornerstones of our Road to Opportunity agenda is tax relief, because North Dakotans deserve to keep more of what they earn. That's why we're advocating for the elimination of the state income tax, along with meaningful property tax relief tied to responsible local spending. Learn more about the Road to Opportunity and our plan to eliminate the state income tax at afpnd.org.
The North Dakota oil and natural gas industry works here, and works here, and here, and even works here by creating 60,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, flood protection projects, and our schools. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities.
Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org.
Everyone, welcome to Plain Talk. Before we get started, we have Chris here from the forum for some North Dakota trivia. Chris, take it away.
All right, guys. I think there's a good chance you guys will get this one.
Oh, man,
this week.
Chris, don't say that. Don't lower the bar.
Because we're not going to get over
I'm trying
it.
to set up. I'm trying to
He's
set up.
lowering the bar, and now we're not going to get over it. Thanks, Chris.
What future governor of New Mexico was born in Minot?
Gary Johnson. Knew it right off the bat. It's Gary Johnson, former presidential candidate, former governor of New Mexico. Born, his parents were at the Minot Air Force Base. I think he left North Dakota when he was 5. I have interviewed Gary Johnson and spoken to him about it.
Listen, I feel like having a Minot-based question here, like the thumb was on the scale in a big way.
Hey, we're still dialing this in, Chet.
Yeah.
Listen. He, previous questions he asked about football and reality television, which I know nothing about. So I feel like I get a Minot one.
Folks out there, if you are curious about the state of North Dakota, it's athletes, it's reality TV stars, it's all sorts of stuff. By all means, subscribe at inforum.com/subscribe for our introductory rate of just $6 for 6 months. And over to you guys for Plain Talk.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk. We're live from Minot at the Blue Rider Bar, where we've been before. They're kind of become friends of the show. We have a really great show today. First, we're going to be talking, it's the Minot show. Although Jill's not from Minot, but we're in Minot, and we do have the mayor of Minot, Mark Janser, who's going to be on a little bit later in the show. But our first guest is Public Service Commissioner Jill Kringstad, who was appointed to that position by Governor Kelly Armstrong. But you got to get elected now to stay on it. So, and this is your first time on the ballot. Now, you're familiar with campaigns. I know you've worked in campaigns before.
Yes.
This is your first time as a candidate.
Yes, it is.
How's it going?
It's going great. I would say first time on the ballot. A lot of firsts for me today. First time at the Blue Rider. First time on Plain Talk. So thank you guys.
Not your first time in Minot.
But not my. No, absolutely not. Absolutely
That would have been breaking news on the campaign.
That would have been breaking news. Yes, not my first time in Minot. But no, the campaign is going really well. We have lots of enthusiasm from all across the state. Kind of like you said, Rob. I was appointed by Governor Kelly Armstrong. So grateful to have his support. The support from Senator Hoeven, Senator Kevin Kramer, Representative Julie Fedorchak. they've just been such great conservative leaders in our state for a long, long time. But the thing I think that gets me most excited out on the campaign trail is when I go into towns and I see all the local grassroots support that's out there. Our campaign is going to release a list of, we have 50 grassroots champions from all across North Dakota that we're really, really excited about. And so just to meet them and hear them talk about how they're saying, we're telling our friends, we're telling our families. I don't know how you guys will feel about this. Somebody told me last week that they were at state baseball or qualifying games for state baseball handing out palm cards.
Oh.
And so the support that we have from across the state is really great. We really feel the energy. So we're excited about that. And over the next 2 weekends, you're going to see myself and a lot of our other statewide candidates as well. Congresswoman Julie Fedorchak is putting together and spearheading a bus, kind of like a bus tour, if you remember the old-fashioned bus tours across the state. So she's calling it the North Dakota, the Delivering for North Dakota tour. We have 10 cities already, and I think we're going to be adding more. So just really looking forward to that and meeting fellow Republicans all across the state and getting them energized and excited to vote on June 9th.
So, Jill, you're certainly a first-time candidate in a very, very unique situation.
Yes.
You and all the candidates that you were just talking about were not endorsed by the North Dakota GOP. Usually when you talk about those bus tours, it's put on by the state party. Can you talk about that decision that you made to not go to the state convention, and how does it feel? I mean, it doesn't feel like, as an observer from the outside, that much different. I mean, you're still incumbents, you're still running as a team, but can you talk about that sort of process to make the decision not to go to the convention, what it's like not being the NDGOP endorsed candidate?
And there is no NDGOP endorsed.
Yeah, I was going to say, yep. There's no NDGOP endorsed candidate for the 2-year term. And I mean, I've been involved with the party since I was 9 years old. I started my first campaign volunteering when John Hoeven was running for governor way back in 2000. So I would show up at headquarters and lick stamps on envelopes and put together yard signs. And I wore out my new pair of school shoes going door to door that year. So have been involved in the process for a really, really long time, but just also recognize that it's bigger than the party, right? There's Republicans all across the state who want to participate in the process, and they're really enthusiastic about myself and a lot of the other statewide candidates and just the results that we've been delivering for North Dakota day in and day out.
So the Public Service Commission, there's a lot of people, I shouldn't start with the public, data centers in the news a lot.
Yeah.
Transmission lines in the news a lot. We had the JetX thing. A lot of people upset about that. Carbon pipelines. Obviously, we saw Summit just recently decided to shift their project. They're not coming through the Dakotas at all now. I think a lot of people get confused about what the PSC's actual role, and I realize I'm talking about 3 very different projects, but what is the PSC's role in these things? Because I hear your opponent talking about data centers. I hear him talking about carbon pipelines. So from your perspective, and I understand you can't talk about immediate cases, but generically, what does the PSC do with regard to those types of projects?
Sure. So data centers in general, first of all, like you said, at the PSC, we're regulators. Okay. So I think the first thing is we're not legislators. We're not here setting policy. What we're doing is we're operating within the confines of the laws and the rules that are passed by the legislature. So when it comes specifically to data centers, we don't say, the PSC has no jurisdiction to say the data center should go here. That's all at the local level. On the other side, we don't have the authority to say there's a moratorium on data centers. That would have to be done by our state legislature. What we do have authority over is I would say, not the impacts of data centers, but like from a siting perspective, if to serve a data center, they would need to build generation or transmission. That would go through our standard siting process.
You guys also regulate utility rates.
We also regulate utility rates. So if the data center is being served by one of our investor-owned utilities like MDU, Otter Tail, and Excel, we could set the rates for that, but we couldn't if the data center is served by one of our electric cooperatives. So like, for example, the data center down near Ellendale, that's served by MDU. And so how the PSC has regulated that is we basically walled them off from the rest of existing customers. So the data center pays for all their costs, both ongoing to connect to the grid. They pay for their costs. And there's also a margin built in. So the margin is paid, some of it goes back to the utility shareholders, but we've also made it so a portion of it does go back to North Dakota MDU ratepayers. And that's about $10 to $15 million a year that MDU ratepayers in North Dakota are seeing from that. So that's the impact that we can have within our jurisdiction. Like I said, it's limited in areas, but the areas where we do have jurisdiction, we do have a real impact.
One follow-up, because I know that's a big concern, is when people talk about data centers, they're concerned about them driving up electrical rates. So from the PSC perspective, you talked about like walling off, but I'm assuming you guys are watching for that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like when a data center comes in your jurisdiction, you're very much looking for that. So what is the philosophical approach, or I guess the policy approach to that?
Well, I would say we would handle this like we would handle any other large electric use customer, right? Like we want to make sure that
it's like a factory or a
exactly,
like that.
Yes, that they're paying their fair share of costs, that they're not negatively impacting existing ratepayers, that the costs that they're coming through are just and reasonable, and we do that by digging really deep into the applications that we get, whether they're rate applications or anything like that. And that's where it's been extremely helpful to put my accounting and economics background to work, because I started my career at Basin Electric working in internal auditing. So I'm used to being in the utility industry and digging really deep and auditing those areas. And that's just what I really enjoy doing.
I'm sorry. I will let you answer.
I know I've been on vacation for a while, Rob, but there is a co-host here.
Well, I know, and I apologize. But just one last question: do you feel that North Dakota's current laws are giving the PSC enough authority to protect? Because you're kind of making it sound like we've already got the PSC already has the tools it needs to make sure that these power users aren't negatively impacting other customers. Do you feel there's more the legislature needs to do to give the PSC more authority or more whatever it needs?
I think that's going to be one of probably the hot topics that's happening at the legislature. And I do know that the legislature has been very proactive in this area. 2 years ago, we saw some legislation that came up around data centers. And I think everybody said, hey, I think we just need more information on this, more time. We want to bring in a lot of subject matter expertise. And so the legislature is actually doing an interim study right now specifically on data centers or other large load customers to see, or I should say other entities that are going to use a large amount of power to say, okay, what legislative changes could there be and should there be? And so that study's ongoing. One of my colleagues is a member of that study, so the Public Service Commission is represented there, but they're pulling in a lot of other stakeholders as well, and so we'll see what that study brings forward.
So Jill, you said that the Ellendale data center is sort of walled off from the rest of the customers. Can you talk at all about if a data center is built in another state, like on the border of Montana or South Dakota, and is an MDU customer? Is that going to affect North Dakota rates if it's like, because you have no regulation over that, correct? Right. So is there like across state lines, would that affect North Dakota electricity users if there's being data centers being built all around the state, but not in North Dakota?
So if they're being built in other states, like the rate regulatory framework would fall under that jurisdiction. Again, there's also a lot of discussions happening like within the regional transmission organization group or like the RTOs. And I won't bore you with all the technical details, but essentially what that is it's like that's the entity that controls the grid, right? So like there's a whole bunch of conversations happening there as well about how are we bringing these large loads on from a regional area in that framework as well to make sure that we can bring them on safely, and then that the states can play a role in making sure that they're being brought on economically.
So I'm going to ask one other data center question. You're a regulator, you're not a policymaker,
right?
But you're also a leader in the state. And what we're seeing in our communities is often decisions on data centers that aren't necessarily based on facts. It's very emotional on both the left and the right. Are there things that you think our communities should be doing better in terms of educating their community on data centers or ways to do outreach from the companies? How can we do this in a better way that maybe people feel a little more comfortable with this infrastructure coming in? Because it's coming somewhere. And so there is something to be said about wanting them to come in North Dakota, but they don't have a really good reputation right now.
Well, and I think what I would encourage for any type of infrastructure, whether we're talking a data center or a transmission line, anything like that, each project is very unique depending on where it's going and how it's going to be built. And so what I just encourage everybody to do is bring your concerns forward, because I hear a lot of them in my role. We have concerns about sound, noise, impacts to the environment. A lot of those conversations are had at the local level before they even come to us. And so what I just encourage everybody to do is engage at your local level. Take your concerns when those local meetings are happening, hear about what the project is, and find out how both the company and your local, whether it's county commission or city commission, is what the actual facts of that project are and how your local entities are mitigating them and working together to make sure that it works for everybody in the community.
So what do you think the priorities are? I mean, what's the big, obviously we're talking about data centers. The oil industry is saying they need carbon, so there's carbon pipelines, but is there something in the PSC's bailiwick that you feel that maybe the public needs to be aware of that's coming down the road? Like, what are you seeing, in North Dakota's future that we need to be getting on top of or thinking about?
So one area that I'm really passionate about is the work that's happening at those regional transmission organizations. And
that's like MISO, that's SPP.
MISO and SPP.
Those are the two that serve North Dakota.
That serve North Dakota, and they're the ones that basically manage the grid. And so with the energy markets that are there, the biggest thing that we need to make sure is happening is that those energy markets are structured appropriately to recognize and be incentivizing the right kind of power in the marketplace. And what we're seeing in the past is that the benefits that all the North Dakota energy provides as far as affordable, reliable baseload power wasn't always being recognized. And so that's one thing that we really need to make sure is within those markets that they're set up appropriately. The other thing that's happening there, and this is one thing that I'm really proud of that we dug into within my first 6 months on the commission, is there's some states within MISO and SPP that have really aggressive renewable mandates. And in order to meet those mandates, they're having to build a lot of infrastructure development, which can be really expensive. Now, again, we need this infrastructure, but our concern is how and who is paying for it. And what we're seeing is a lot of these states are using the cost allocation framework within the RTOs to pass those costs on to states that don't have these renewable mandates. And so within my first 6 months, I led the effort to bring a case to FERC, and that's basically the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, again, another acronym, but just the entity that oversees it and can make a decision on whether those costs are accurate or not. And so with the help of the legislature, we brought a case forward to prevent other states, again, if they want to have these renewable goals, that's fine, that's their decision, but then they should pay for the costs of their policy decisions. And so I spearheaded the effort on the PSC to prevent those costs from being brought back to North Dakota ratepayers. And that's something that I'm really proud of.
I want to talk a little bit about electricity rates. North Dakota is one of the lowest, if not the lowest, electricity rates in the country. The PSC has a role of regulating IOUs electricity rates, but about 50%, I think 50% of people are with co-ops. So can you talk about the PSC's, what your considerations you take into when you're talking about an increase for IOUs? And do you work with co-ops in terms of making sure that their rates are similar to IOUs, or is there any sort of collaboration there?
So, Chad, no, we don't. The legislature has not given us any type of rate regulatory authority over our electric cooperatives. They have a different model than our investor-owned utilities, and so their rates are set by their board of directors, which are elected by their cooperative members. So what we do with our investor-owned utilities is whenever we get a case, we look at everything that's going in there. It can be ongoing operations, capital expenses, taxes, and we dive really deep into there and say, okay, are these costs just and reasonable for the North Dakota ratepayers? Or are these being selected? And we kind of saw this in the Excel rate case that just happened. Some of the costs that they were proposing, we said, no, these costs seem to be driven by what's happening in Minnesota and their renewable mandates. So it's not appropriate for our ratepayers in North Dakota to be paying these costs. And so we were balancing all this development and the cost that you need to have a healthy, effective utility, because our utilities do provide a vital service, and it's a balance between cost but also reliability, because that's kind of the other thing we hear, right, is when there's a storm, then people, I think, really want, well, we should have paid extra to have all the extra poles and the crews on standby and everything like that. So it truly is a balancing act to make sure that we're providing that reliable service at affordable rates for customers. And I think we've done that very well at the Public Service Commission. We right now have the lowest electric rates in the nation. And the impact that has, I always like to say, we have the lowest rates. Louisiana has the second lowest rates. If North Dakota consumers were paying Louisiana rates, they would be paying $250 million more. So that's the impact of having an effective regulatory framework, effective industry that works well and is balancing growth with costs. It really is a good partnership.
Of co-ops that are willing to keep their prices down
as well.
The public service, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a political question. It's probably unfair that you're running for the first time to get elected. But the PSC has been something of a, I'm going to say minor league, but, Senator Kevin Cramer came through the Public Service Commissioner. Julie Fedorchak came through the Public Service Commission. Brian Kalk, who is now president of Bismarck State College, came through the PSC. Brian Croce is tax commissioner now. Although that might be a little bit of a lateral move. Yeah, I don't know.
We always tease him. He got demoted to the tax department, but anyway. And I tell Brian that to his face, so I'm okay. I tell him that to his face. So
I don't know. Either job sounds that exciting to me.
You might see this. Oh wow. Tony Clark, you mentioned FERC. Tony Clark went to work. At FERC.
Now the head of NAREIT.
So I mean, at some point in the future, do you see yourself moving up the ladder in that way?
Honestly, Rob, I'm just focused on doing the best job I can in what I have right now. And I'm very passionate about the work that we do at the PSC and how it impacts everybody in our state. We kind of talked about before we went live how we're all a little bit nerdy. And I think for somebody like me to be able, with my background in accounting, having my CPA and economics, yes, it's a very technical job.
Some of your public hearing.
Yes. And so we know what Rob does for fun. Yes. But yes, having that ability to put those skills to work for the people of North Dakota is just something I'm very passionate about. And so I love what I'm doing and I just want to continue to do it. And that's why I'm running. And I hope that the people of North Dakota see that and appreciate that and love their support on June 9th in the primary.
So speaking of your campaign, one of the issues in past PSC races has been where PSC members have gotten their contributions from and if they should take money from organizations they regulate.
Yeah.
I think you have taken some contributions from organizations that the PSC regulates. How would you respond if somebody says, hey, you're getting money from Energy Transfer partnerships or other groups like that as a member of the PSC? Do you think that's acceptable? Do you think it affects your decision making? What would you respond if somebody were to bring that up?
Yeah.
Like I just did.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've have support in my campaign from a wide variety of people, and all of my donations are very transparent on the Secretary of State's website. And we also have to follow the newly created Ethics Commission rules. And so all of my donations, I'll stand behind all of them. They're transparent on the website and they're per the Ethics Commission rules. So
as a matter of fact, that's where I found those contributions earlier today. They're very transparent.
I want to ask you, you do have an opponent. Neither of you were endorsed. Neither of you, I think he went to the convention but didn't seek the endorsement.
Yeah,
he had signed
too late or something. Like
Chris
that.
Olson is your opponent. Voters are going to have a choice come primary day. Why you and not him?
So what I will say is I just think my background and experience is a perfect fit for this job. It's a very technical job. I've jumped in feet first, and everything that I've done has been to protect North Dakota ratepayers. We can see that with the fact that we have the lowest electric rates in the nation, with the suit that we brought to FERC to make sure that our state's costs are not being affected by outside influences. And, one of the things I've just was grown up and I was raised, my dad always liked to say, leave something better than you found it and always do the right thing. And so that's my promise to voters. That's what I strive to do every single day. And so I hope to earn their support on June 9th.
I have one final question for you, and hopefully it's a fun one.
Yeah.
So Rob and I started this podcast under the idea of having somebody from the right and somebody from the left sort of talking about issues. I learned recently that your sister is a Democrat district chair in Fargo. How are those like holidays together? I mean, you're a Republican statewide elected official. She's clearly a Democrat activist. I love that because I think every every family has that.
Yeah.
Maybe not in those prominent roles,
Sure.
but everybody has it. You talk about that relationship and how those conversations around politics go.
Yeah. So I joked that I was going to say we hadn't spoken in 5 years and make it awkward, but no, it's not like that at all. I love my sister. She's great. One of the kindest people I know. Obviously, like, we have different views on politics, and that's okay. We've always said that, like, there is nothing more important than family, and we're not going to let anything, especially politics, come in between that. We don't discuss everything, but the things that we do discuss, we have very substantive back and forth discussions that are respectful, and we always walk away and say, okay, you have your opinion, I have mine, I just see things differently, and I love you anyway.
And do you find that you agree on more than you would expect a Democrat and a Republican to agree on? I think that's one of the things in today's society. Like, people are looking for reasons to disagree, but at the end of the day, we as Americans, we agree on a heck of a lot more than we
I
disagree.
think Chad and I have found that we agree on a lot
Absolutely.
more than we expect.
Yes, exactly. I'd agree with that too.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for your time and for coming to Minot for this. I really appreciate
Thank you so much for having me.
First time in Minot, right?
First-
No, that's
No,
not
no,
right.
not
That's not
first
right.
time
That's
in
not
Minot.
right.
That wasn't one of the first, Chad.
North Dakota Farmers Union.
North Dakota Farmers Union makes family farming and ranching their business. So while you're working hard, Farmers Union is working just as hard to address issues that impact your bottom line. Everything from high input costs and trade tariffs to market concentration and a new farm bill. Farmers Union is the organization led by and for family farmers and ranchers. If you aren't already a member, join them at ndfu.org.
North Dakota Farmers Union.
This episode is presented by Recovery Centers of Montana.
If you or someone you know is struggling, getting help shouldn't feel out of reach.
Recovery Centers of Montana offers care across 6 locations, including inpatient facilities and outpatient clinics.
Step away from the noise and focus on getting your life back on track.
Learn more by calling 701-401-3000.
That's 701-401-3000.
Today's program is sponsored by the North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives, representing locally owned electric co-ops that power homes, farms, and businesses across rural North Dakota. Electric cooperatives are committed to reliable, affordable energy and strengthening the communities they serve. Learn more at ndarec.com. Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Still in Minot, still at the Blue Rider Bar, but now we're bringing in the mayor of Minot, Mark Janser. Mark, how are you?
I'm well. Good afternoon.
Now, Mark's one of those guys, I feel, we were talking, Chad and I were talking earlier, we were hanging around a Prairie Sky Breads downtown before the show, and we were talking a little bit about how every town has somebody that seems like they've just done about just about everything in the town, right? And we were talking about like a small town, so they've mowed the baseball field, they raised money for the gym at the school. I feel like you're one of those people for Minot. Like, you've done a lot of different things in mind. Now you're the mayor, served on city council for a long time, Task Force 21 out at the Air Force Base for a long time. You've really done a lot to serve this community.
Yeah. Well, thanks. It's been a labor of love. I got here in '77. Grew up in Bismarck, went to school in Minnesota, dragged my wife back to North Dakota, sort of kicking and screaming. We lived in Bismarck for a year or two, and then moved here to Minot, and we just felt at home right away. It was a wonderful change for us, and she's a farm girl, so it was like a big small town to her, and happy wife, happy life. So that was all good stuff. And yeah, I got involved in the Chamber of Commerce and some other activities, and just started to kind of dig in and try to do what I could do.
So Rob, as he mentioned before the show today, he sort of took me around downtown a little bit and showed me around. And Minot's downtown has really become a great place. I mean, with great restaurants and coffee shops, just like right here at the Blue Rider. Are you happy with what's going on in Minot? Like, what are your proudest accomplishments of the growth? And I mean, it just seems like it's a striving community right now.
I think it takes a lot of partners, and I think it's happened on a number of levels. In the past several years, with the Discovery Center Children's Museum showing up, the new hospital, the Renaissance that's happened here downtown. It was a miserable 3 years when we were doing all the underground infrastructure replacement after the flood here. But these merchants, a lot of them have hung in there. Some great downtown businesses that are still around, and they survived that. And then a lot of new great businesses have rolled in, some good restaurants, some good bars, and kind of different places to do things. So yeah, I mean, Minot, I think, is in a good spot, and hopefully we can improve on that as we go forward and add some more things.
As much as I'd like to sing Minot's praises all day, because I love Minot, I love my hometown. But let's talk a little bit about policy. The legislature, and we've talked a lot about it on the show, the legislature passed property tax reform. And part of that reform was a 3% cap on spending.
Sure.
So we're into it now, right? Legislature passed it. You've been living with it. You've been budgeting with it for a while now. How's it going?
Well, I think, when you go back to the Measure 4 proposition, and that failed pretty dramatically, 68%, I think, if I remember right. But in that process, there was a lot of talk about property tax and property tax reform, and, people were given a message that this is something that's almost inherently evil, and that we have to get rid of it, or drastically change the system. So I guess the legislature put the caps in place of 3%. There are some additional factors to that, however. So you do have a three-year look back within that cap, and so if you, for instance, our fiscal year 2024, Minot was actually levying somewhere in the neighborhood of $28 million in property tax. That's been reduced in the last two budgets, primarily by using reserves that we were able to utilize for that. But that's not a sustainable strategy, as you can imagine. And so we're going to soon, and I think part of it's going to happen in the 27 budget. We're going to come to a point where we're going to have to figure out whether we can make enough drastic cuts in services or in expenses, or whether we need to look at where we go with revenue sources. And so, I just read an article the other day that said that there's something like a dozen, or maybe 10 or a dozen
sales tax.
Sales tax initiatives where counties and cities are going to sales tax to try to solve some of these things. We don't have that ability in the sense that, for two reasons. One, we're kind of tapped out on sales tax.
Well, the state caps how much the locals can.
Yeah, it's 2%. I think is our cap, and we're there. And much of our sales tax revenue is dedicated to covering the bonds and the debt service on our flood protection project. And so, so we don't have quite the latitude on sales tax that some communities do.
So you said essentially you're spending the reserves in Minot right now, and things are going to come home to roost in a few years because you can't continue to spend at the same level unless revenues change. One of my frustrations in North Dakota and actually in the country is often people don't connect the government that they get with the revenue, with the taxes that they pay. So a lot of people want things and they don't want to pay taxes. And so you're running for mayor and you're going to have to deal with this in 2027. From your perspective, what does that look like? If you can't raise sales tax, do you raise property taxes? Are there specific things that you think should be cut? Because again, I think people want all the services and they don't want to have to pay for it. It's a tough political environment.
Right. So it is a tough political environment, and it's going to come down to some choices. And as you guys know, we have a city council election happening as well as the mayoral election, and so we're gonna find out what the composition of the council is and what kind of appetite they have for any and all of those choices. I do think there is some opportunity for a combination of things. I think there are some expenses that we can cut. We have our department heads working on a 3% reduction to their budgets from last year. We are not quite sure yet, because we don't get that information until a little bit later. We aren't quite sure yet what health insurance premiums are going to do. We don't know what the city manager's recommendation is going to be, and we don't have anything from the employee wages section, the folks that are going to give us that. So there's a number of things, and there have been things that have changed as we've gone forward. One of the things was we were a drastically understaffed police department. When Chief Fry came in, he was able to change some recruiting practices and do some things to the point where now we have almost a full staff of sworn officers. That's great, but we were also not funding some of those positions because they had gone unfilled for more than 1 year. And so now we're going to have to fund things for the police department. We also have an issue that came up with respect to our pound service. We had a contractor that, for whatever reason, the majority of the council wasn't able to come to terms with. That contract expired. They didn't bid on the second RFP that was put out. And so we have a temporary pound in operation at least through August, but it's not in a building that we have ownership of, and they're going to want it, the people, it's county building, and they're going to want that back when winter sets in so that they can store their equipment. So there's some challenges with respect to that. But I to get back to your question, I think there's a combination of things that I'm hopeful we can do, dealing with expenses and some things where timing may change. So, for instance, we had committed to a $5 million per year for 3 phases, so 3 years of $5 million, to refurbish the former city hall as a fitted up police department that hopefully will last them for 15 or 20 years. So the first tranche of that money was in this year, 26. It may turn out that with the planning and work with the architect and so forth, that by the time they actually get that first tranche of money spent, we'll be on the verge of 27. So maybe there's a gap year there where we don't have to, come up with the $5 million that year out of reserves. So there's some things. But the thing that the other thing I want to avoid is doing things that are just simply bad stewardship. In other words, we need to keep fixing streets and roads. That's a high priority for our citizens. It comes through in our surveys.
That becomes a very easy solution that I think people try is, let's defer maintenance.
Right.
Yeah. Because we'll push it off, and then it's somebody else's problem.
It's a lot more expensive.
But then the problem is exactly. The further you push it off, it's going to get more and more expensive to fix that
Absolutely.
road, or more and more expensive to redo that building.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, you're suffering with, less than ideal roads and, bouncing along.
Well, that brings me to that question about property, because it's Chad and I've talked a lot about the disconnect, and Chad brought it up, where people want things like they want our government buildings to look nice. They don't want potholes in the road, but they don't want to pay the tax. And there's been this disconnect, and I think it's specific to property taxes, especially because we see people looking for the solutions at the state level, whether it's a statewide ballot initiative to get rid of property taxes, or going to the legislature and having the legislature do something. I mean, how much of this is just voters needing to understand we have a community, we have to pay for things. Sometimes that might mean tax increases.
Yeah. This is not a problem or issue that's unique to North Dakota or to Minot. Certainly, I have friends in Wyoming, and they've gone through some of the same stuff. Other places in the country are like that. I think you hit on a fair point that there is a desire for services, and there's a need for a way to fund them. And I'm a realist about where our system is. I mean, in the current environment, we live in a system where we operate within federal, state, county, local jurisdictions. And, unless something drastic changes, one of the primary, if not the primary way that local services get funded is through property tax. The people of North Dakota voted not to change that. And the state legislature did a great job of getting a message of, hey, we need some relief. Mm-hmm. And so for people who, have a primary residence, they provided relief for that. And I think that's been well received, and it's going well. But you're correct. It doesn't get rid of the essential fact that, if you want these services, and they're subject to inflation, and, fire engines used to cost $1 million. Now they're $1.5 million. Labor is higher, all of the things that we in our daily lives, price of fuel, recently that's become an issue for the next budget. So all of these things affect city government in a similar way to the way they affect your household. And it makes sense that, we need to come up with enough revenue, and people dislike property tax. I get it. I pay the same property tax.
I don't love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't think of a better way to do it.
Yeah, I don't love it. I think if we start imposing franchise fees, it's just another way of getting that money. It doesn't really solve it. So I think there is a reality that has to set in where you say, hey, right now, if we levy the same tax that we did last year, roughly 20.1 or so million, our combined police and fire department budgets for public safety are going to be more than that. And so it kind of paints a picture of, we're going to have to come to grips with what the realities are of needs and wants and what's necessity.
So how do you coordinate? It's one of my frustrations in Bismarck, the city, county, park, school district, maybe not coordinating very well in terms of their budgeting needs. But, all of a sudden you have the city bumping up property taxes, you have the county bumping up property taxes, the schools bumping up property taxes. In Bismarck right now, there's a vote in June, a bond measure for schools, which is very important, but also a 1 cent sales tax for the city at the exact same time. How well do you guys in Minot coordinate with the other political subs on budgeting decisions and how it affects taxpayers?
Sure. I think
that's, by the way, I think that's one of the weird, one of the real not problems, but one of the weird dynamics about property taxes. From your perspective, you're one part of that property tax bill.
Property taxes can go
but
up
from
if you're lowering it.
But from my perspective, it's all the same bill.
Right. And I would tell you, that, sometimes it seems like right now, I think in FY26, I think of the dollar of property tax, I think the city was right around 25%. So we're not even like half, let alone the majority of what your property tax bill is. And yet it seems like a lot of anger, or, people who are unhappiness is a better word, kind of goes towards the city. And I think that's all unfortunate. We try, I think there have been conversations since I've been on the council where we have tried to be sensitive to what you're talking about. And the example I would give was the bond issue for the new high school. I think there was a consensus among the various subs that was something that the school district probably needed to get done. And we weren't going to be helpful if we were going after more tax at the same time. So I think there is some coordination. It's maybe less formal or less tight than it could be, but I feel like the city government has a pretty good relationship with Ward County. We have worked on that, and we've had some a joint meeting, a council and county commission, to try to work on some common issues like the library thing, which is under discussion, a merger or some kind of use agreements where we can help each other out. Some things with the extraterritorial area where some people feel like they are either getting a bad deal on building permits or aren't getting representation because they're kind of governed by a city regulation, but they're not they don't get a vote. And so, and then we have some weird enclaves within the city where they're actually not annexed into the city proper, but so it's county jurisdiction, but there's some piece of land that's totally surrounded by the city
limits of Minot. I was showing my son the other day, and he's like, "Well, what's this?" And I said, "Well, that's in Minot, but it's not."
Yeah,
Minot,
and
It's not in Minot.
well, and that's another thing. So, in cases where some property has been annexed and brought into the city, we haven't necessarily moved the extraterritorial line out to account for that. So there's places where the ET is tiny, or non-existent. It's right up to city limits. There isn't any, but in other places it's out to 2 miles. And so the planning department is working on we're trying to figure that out.
Let me ask you this. In fact, I think you're gonna be going to a debate right after this with your opponent.
Correct.
This is the second time you were on the ballot last year in June. It was a special election.
Yep. Correct.
And now you're on the ballot again. This would be the regular election.
Correct.
Your opponent is Josiah Royce, who we actually had on the show not that long ago. Why you and not him? Why should Minot stick with you?
Well, I think I think I have experience and an understanding of city government in Minot and how things have worked. I'm certainly open to making changes if they make sense and if they're realistic. And I have things that I want to see brought to completion. NAWS, which we hope to get water from starting yet this summer, August.
Northwest Area Water Supply Project, which has been worked on for my entire adult life.
Yeah. But, we're like this far away. I mean, all the pieces are basically in place. We just have to get the final touches put on the biota treatment plant down at Max. So that progress on our flood protection project, and then there's always more work to be done on the 3 wicked problems that pretty much every community and a lot of places are facing. Housing, we're redoing our land development ordinance to try to make it easier for builders and developers to do their work. Childcare, and then workforce. And it's like, chicken and the egg with all of those. If you try to attract workforce, but if they don't have a place to live, there's nobody to take care of their kids. It's not very successful. So, all of those things I hope to be able to work on in a continuing basis.
Okay, I've got one final question. I was saying so many nice things about Minot at the beginning of this interview. Here it comes. Last week I took the train. The parking lot of the train station is one of the worst parking lots I've ever seen. And I want to know, can the city fix that, or is it the railroad's job, or that parking lot is terrible, and the road leading up to it?
Okay, so
you weren't ready for that question, were you?
I hadn't prepared for that one, but I will tell you. So it is railroad property, okay. And so my first reaction, and I don't want to be fact checked, so I'll hold my answer a little bit because I don't want to say something wrong, but yes, I'm well aware of that. It is something that needs to be done. But I think it boils back to the fact that it is railroad property. If we ask them if the city could come in and fix some of that stuff, I'm not sure what answer we would get, frankly. There's another street that runs along the tracks, just north of this downtown segment here, which is kind of the same problem. It's not city property, and therefore it is difficult to say we're going to go in and put a bunch.
Burlington Northern is listening right now. Come and fix the parking lot, or Amtrak, or whoever.
Yeah. They're both. The railroad goes through. And that's one of the features of Minot. Rob, from living here all your life, this is a railroad. We have 2 Class A railroads that come through Minot, and it's great unless they wake you up in the middle of the night like they do my wife, or you're sitting at a crossing that's grade level waiting to get somewhere.
Although we fixed a lot of that over the years.
We've got a lot.
It's a lot better than it used to be.
We've got a lot of those fixed. So,
Mark, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. And good luck in your debate in a little bit.
Appreciate it. On we go. The campaign continues. So thanks for what you guys are doing. I enjoy the show.
Great. That's it for today on Plain Talk. Remember, you can always follow us on social media. Plain Talk ND on TikTok, Facebook, X, all the places. You could subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you go to plaintalknd.com, that's actually our YouTube channel, which is a great way to follow the show. We've got clips for every show. We've got all the back catalog. We've got the interviews cut up from the commentary. It's a really great way to watch and listen to the show. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening.
Happy wife, happy life. So that was all good stuff.
Hi, I'm Megan Invick with Americans for Prosperity, North Dakota. One of the cornerstones of our Road to Opportunity agenda is tax relief, because North Dakotans deserve to keep more of what they earn. That's why we're advocating for the elimination of the state income tax, along with meaningful property tax relief tied to responsible local spending. Learn more about the Road to Opportunity and our plan to eliminate the state income tax at afpnd.org.
This episode is presented by Recovery Centers of Montana.
If you or someone you know is struggling, getting help shouldn't feel out of reach.
Recovery Centers of Montana offers care across 6 locations, including inpatient facilities and outpatient clinics.
Step away from the noise and focus on getting your life back on track.
Learn more by calling 701-401-3000.
That's 701-401-3000.
The North Dakota oil and natural gas industry works here, and works here, and here, and even works here by creating 60,000 jobs statewide and generating billions of tax dollars annually to support our infrastructure, flood protection projects, and our schools. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities.
Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org.